The IPCRESS File is one of the most significant entries into the spy movie world. And in part 2, we will continue to crack the code of the IPCRESS File. So let's go.
Hi, this is Tom Pizzato
And Dan Silvestri
of SpyMovieNavigator.com. Join us for each episode as we're cracking the code of spy movies. And don't forget to subscribe to our show.
In part 2 here of the IPCRESS File, we're going to look at Harry Palmer's character development. And we're going to look at some of the key scenes in the movie. As the movie's going on, we're learning a little bit about Harry Palmer's character here. For instance, in the beginning, he's getting up, ready to get to work and so on. He finds a bracelet in his bed along with his gun.
Yeah, so wait, he's a womanizer and he sleeps with a gun. Maybe he isn't the anti-Bond.
Yeah, it's okay. There you go. So all this is going on, and the music, da 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 da.
Oh yeah, that music was great.
John Barry, of course.
Yeah, John Barry did the music. He used this instrument called a cymbalum, which is kind of like a plucked zither. And
okay, yeah.
You see that in other movies. So like In the Heat of the Night, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Black Stallion, Grand Budapest Hotel use this instrument. So it's a very distinctive sounding instrument that they used here. And in fact, Lalo Schifrin used it for several scores of the Mission Impossible TV series.
Anyway, the music is good. John Barry, of course, he's always great. And some of the music's weird here, but some of it is really John Barry stuff, and it's terrific. So Harry Palmer here is going to his shift at a stakeout room. That's where he's got to get up and go. And he shows up there. He's 20 minutes late. Sounds a little familiar, right?
A little Bond-esque.
Maybe these agents are so far apart, bonding him. So maybe Harry Palmer is just thinking too much, or maybe he's just having a little too much fun. Who knows? But he's late. So anyway, we're finding out a little bit about him. He's late occasionally, and I think we'll find out as this goes along. This is one of his things. We also find out he's been reassigned to this Major Dalby's outfit. We don't know why. Probably because he's a good agent, but he's, like Tom said, he's a reluctant agent.
Well, they had an opening because Taylor got killed.
And Taylor got killed. And Dalby has him working on the missing Radcliffe case immediately. So he's taking Taylor's place, who, like you said, was just killed that very morning. So we also see the tension between Major Dalby and Colonel Ross.
And Dalby reports to Ross, right?
Right. Dalby reports to Ross. And as they're speaking in Dalby's office, Ross says, this kind of sums up their whole relationship, I think. Ross says, I set you up, and you got a very good job for a passed-over major. It's like, boom, right between the eyes on that one.
One of the cool things with the scenes with these guys is they're doing them in their offices. And these are Ken Adams sets. And when we see Bond, we think of these big, elaborate sets for Bond. Here, they're very emptied out flats where you're seeing more of the architectural structure of the room that's in it. They're not ornate. They're not super furnished.
It's kind of empty.
Yeah, kind of a wartime office feel, giving us this grittiness. And this was Ken Adams' design. He wanted it to be more down to earth, have that wartime office feel. Again, they talk about that more in the director's cut.
Yeah. And you'll see more of these things with Palmer, the womanizer end of Palmer. I think all this is going on with Dalby and Ross talking. Meanwhile, Palmer's looking out a window at three women crossing the street, and he smiles like, all right, a little closer to Bond than we think, I think, in general. Again, as Dalby and Palmer walk into another room, Palmer is checking out a woman, and he's obvious about it. And Dalby...
everybody knew he was checking her out.
Yeah, right. So there you go. And then what's going on here is Dalby's issuing Palmer a Colt 32, and they take his automatic away, which he liked his automatic. Again, this is kind of like Bond losing his Beretta and getting the Walther PPK and Dr. No.
That whole sequence was right out of Bond.
Yeah, right.
You had them, they're walking through past those munitions cases and the hand grenades, and then there's that plunger thing, and he has to hit the plunger. And then he gets in this room to go get his gun, and the guy's got a drill, and he starts playing with the drill, just like Bond would always do when he's in Q's labs.
Yeah,
and then
he yells at him.
Then he didn't want to give up his gun, but they made him give up his gun.
They made him give up the gun.
Go to a different gun than he had. It's exactly like in Dr. No.
Yeah, so they go into this briefing, and he's in a room with other agents, and he sits next to the only woman agent that's in there, Jean.
There were a lot of seats, and he had to walk past her to get into that seat.
Yeah. And he's sitting there next to her, checking out her legs. Obvious, too. So, okay. He's checking out a woman's legs, Jean Courtney. And in the briefing, we learn of Sparrow and Blue Jay, the code names for Eric Grantby. His code name was Blue Jay, and he's one of the main characters in the whole movie. So his boss
He wasn't his boss. He was his chief of staff.
Oh, yeah, his chief of staff, right. His chief of staff is House Martin, right? House Martin. His code name, right.
Yeah.
So we see more character traits revealed, which is kind of fun because it's the first time we're seeing Harry Palmer. Lots of paperwork he has on his desk, and the woman who's unmoney penny like
Alice.
Alice
is the only woman he doesn't hit on in this movie.
Yeah, and with a reason, I think. She has a cigarette hanging out of her lips all the time she's talking. Not good. Anyways, he got a lot of paperwork. He's got to file all these reports every time he makes an inquiry and so on. He's like...
and all of these reports have a letter and a number associated with them. It reminded me of the TPS reports in Office Space.
Yeah, right. He's like, I'm an action guy. I don't like all this paperwork stuff. He's a man of action. So he proves it by following up on the lead for Grantby before any of the other agents assigned to the case do. And he meets him. He confronts him. He's in on Grantby already. His first time out. While these other agents are like, nah, we didn't find anything. So it's like, okay. So he is good at that. Paperwork stuff? No. They're another character kind of thing. And after the Grantby encounter, which he does quickly, he's back at his apartment and something looks a little suspicious here. He enters with a drawn gun. So something's weird. And the woman agent, Jean Courtney's there checking up on him. So he's like, okay, you looked at everything, so you know where the whiskey is. Go fix us a couple of whiskeys.
This scene actually had a lot of that. There's the one shot in this scene where they're looking through a keyhole.
Yeah, that's true.
And Sidney Furie talks about how important that scene was.
And how tough it was.
How tough it was to do, but how something similar has been copied in other movies.
Yeah.
From that, he's thinking he was the first one to do something like that. I don't know if he was or not. He claims he was. But that it was then mimicked or...
they tried all kinds of things, he said, and they finally had a cardboard cutout.
Yeah, exactly.
Looked like a keyhole or whatever. Anyway, this is a great scene. He's there with Jean Courtney, and he's, hey, go get us a couple of whiskeys, put on some music, Mozart, music to cook by.
Well, that's because he cooks.
Yeah.
Right? And he's going to cook her the best meal she's ever had, he said. And so one of his traits is he's into food.
Yes.
He's into cooking.
Yeah.
In fact, in the title sequence, there's a shot where they're cracking eggs one-handed. There's 2 eggs they crack one-handed.
Yeah.
It was actually Len Deighton who wrote the novels doing that because Michael Caine couldn't master that skill.
Yeah.
In the short amount of time they had to train him on it.
That's funny. So I was like, okay. So here they are in his flat, and he's like, hey, so what are you going to tell Dalby in your L101 report? And she says that you like girls. Palmer says, well, you got that right. And she says, you're not a tearaway. You like books, you like music and cooking and so on. And he says, I like birds best.
Now, it was interesting. After this movie came out, with his horn-rimmed glasses, with his cooking, there were articles and stuff where people were saying they thought the character was gay.
Yeah.
Which was, I mean, today you wouldn't think twice.
Yeah. At the time, in the mid-'60s, yeah. But now,
But then he's such a womanizer.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so that's what her report's going to be. Hey, you like girls? He says, yeah,
I like birds best.
Yeah. All right.
So afterwards, he gets a call from Scotland Yard because he had used somebody there to get some information about Grantby, and he finds out the guy they had picked up had a suitcase full of electronics. Yeah. By the time Harry gets there, he'd been killed, and this was House Martin, by someone posing as Harry. Mm-hmm. So Palmer kind of figures things out and ends up going to a disused warehouse. And he does this all on his own, actually says, yeah, I've got this clearance to do this, which he didn't really have. Yeah. And an army of agents swoop in because maybe Radcliffe's there.
Mm-hmm. That's
Palmer, he had no authority to do this. And that's the kind of agent that Palmer is. I'm just going to, this is what I think is there. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go into that warehouse because I think it's the right move. Remember, Ross described him as insubordinate, insolent, and a trickster.
Yeah.
Perhaps with criminal tendencies.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that. He's a man of action. It's like, it kind of reminds me of Yoda from Star Wars. Do or do not. There is no try. This is how Palmer is every minute in the movie. It's do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah, now this is where Palmer finds that tape we talked about earlier. They bring that into the headquarters and they hear this screeching noise.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chino actually creates a file because everything has to have a file.
Yeah,
and he labels it the IPCRESS file. And on the file, it actually said 10-I.D. So the file had a number associated with it as well, in keeping with the bureaucracy that Harry was trying to avoid.
Yeah. And they're trying to make sense of the screeching sounds and so on. So again, we're learning more and more about Harry. All right, so we see a little more character revealed here at the supermarket where Harry Palmer runs into Ross. And Palmer is selecting champignon mushrooms, more expensive. And Ross points out that, hey, you're paying for the French label, and there's cheaper ones down here. And Palmer retorts that champignon have a better flavor. It's not just the price. So
very Bond-like feel.
Yeah, so he's kind of a gourmet of sorts.
This scene, though, actually cracked me up because it was interesting the way they actually dealt with this, because it told me two things about Ross and about British life, I think, in the mid-'60s.
Okay.
First, it shows class differences. Ross makes a comment, I don't really care for these American shopping methods.
Yeah.
One has to move with the times, I suppose. So I think there was showing a little class distinction between the two.
Like in Italy, they go to the butcher for meat. They go to the greengrocer for vegetables and so on. That's what he meant. He didn't like the concept of the supermarket thing. He liked hey, I'm going to go get my stuff here, and I'm going to get this there. I'm going to get this particular product.
But Tesco had been around for a long time.
He didn't use them.
It just confused me, but let's go on. Why was Ross there, Dan?
Well,
why was Ross in the supermarket?
Yeah, now Ross wasn't there shopping because that's not his thing. He doesn't like that kind of supermarket thing, right? So he wants Palmer to microfilm the IPCRESS file and give it to him and not tell Dalby about it. Or he threatens, hey, you may end up back in prison. Palmer confirms nothing at this moment. So doesn't confirm whether he will do it or won't do it. But he's looking at him like, oh, man. And back at his apartment, Jean Courtney's there, and she sees the champignon mushrooms that he just bought. And she says, nothing but the best for our Palmer. I love it. So it's a nice scene later with the glasses, as we had mentioned before, and her consent with the glasses getting taken off. So the process is unfolding. Dalby and Palmer are in a park listening to the concert. Grantby is meeting Dalby there, and arrangements are being made to buy back Radcliffe. Yeah. Very solid scene. The man with the taped glasses is kind of watching in the background.
Who is that guy?
And Palmer eventually gets up and he leaves. He's really his own
Well, he leaves
guy.
while they were playing Mozart, and he had said he really was more into Mozart.
Yeah, right.
And that's when he leaves, when the marching band starts playing it.
Yeah, it's like I marched to my own drum concert. Anyway, there's a cool scene there. We talked about all these shots through things. There's a shot through crashing cymbals, which is a great shot. That's a beautiful one. So watch for that one.
Or a gimmicky shot, depending how you want to look at that.
Yeah, a good one. I think it's a great one. I thought it was great. As this progresses, there's an exchange in an underground parking garage. Of course, they're trying to get back Radcliffe, as they would just set up. So there's this exchange in the underground parking garage with great lighting from the opposing headlights.
Well, this is what they just set up during the marching band concert with Grant.
To get
this exchange to get Radcliffe.
Yeah, to get Radcliffe back.
Yeah.
And there's money exchanged. The bad guys are going to get the money, and they're going to get Radcliffe back. So there's a nice close-up of the man who's counting the money, and he looks very efficient, going through the piles of money. And he's very efficient because they actually hired a bank teller to go flip through the money. So that was actually...
Yeah, you see, there's a different actor, but then when they do the close-up of the hands, it's the bank teller.
Yeah. So the exchange is made. The doctor's examining Radcliffe. He's like, okay, yeah, boom. They take Radcliffe. They take the money, and the guys leave with the money. But then there's gunfire. And our man, Palmer, jumps into action and machine guns down this guy. It turns out it's the guy with the tape on his glasses. And there's some great John Barry music playing. And very, very solid, good music. And good camera work, too. As Dalby examines the dead guy that shot, he's like, well, great. You just killed an American agent.
Yeah. Congratulations, Palmer. You just killed an American agent.
Yeah.
I love that line.
Yeah. They got Radcliffe now. The guy with the tape glasses is dead. So Palmer's assigned to keep an eye on Radcliffe now that they've got him back. And it becomes apparent after another person is following them that Radcliffe is not really himself. He's going to do this lecture. His scientific abilities are hindered, as is evidenced at the lecture where he's going to talk about the proto-proton scattering device.
Now, there were two things about this that I absolutely love this lecture.
Okay.
Right? The first thing is Palmer's sitting there and he takes his glasses off to clean them, and the room is blurry. And he kind of focuses in. There's one black guy in the room. He focuses in on the guy who's got the pipe. He's the guy that's been following him. He puts the glasses on and everything becomes clear.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that I love about it is you mentioned this proton scattering device. Dan, you know me. I'm going to look up what the heck.
You didn't look that up, did you?
And he was talking about meson production. Okay. So what is a proton scattering device and mesons? All right. So I went to Wikipedia to figure this out. All right. So in particle physics, mesons are hadrotic subatomic particles composed of one quark and one antiquark bound together by strong interactions. Because mesons are composed of quark subparticles, they have a meaningful physical size.
Oh.
Diameter of roughly 1 femtometer? I don't know.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
1.2 times the size of a proton.
Okay. All right.
I'll stop.
For all you scientists out there, there you go. Tom's done a little research for you.
Proton scattering and mesons that he talks about are real things.
All right. Tom could give a lecture on this now. It's just nice.
No, I'm reading on Wikipedia right now.
All right. So anyway, there is this brain drain concept going on here. And what Ross and Dalby were thinking is true, that, hey, there is a scientific brain drain. So Dalby and Ross meet. And Dalby says, hey, the Americans have put a tail on Palmer. If he's clean, he hasn't got anything to worry about. Ross says, but hey, what if he's not? Because we don't really know what's going on with Palmer, really, or
That's
Dalby
true.
or Ross. So Ross says, and what if he's not? The Americans will take care of him and save us a lot of bother. Ross says that. Whoa. Now, we're thinking all along, kind of, hey, Ross is kind of on Palmer's side. This doesn't sound like it.
This doesn't sound like it. Now, there's another tie-in at this scene to another Bond movie. And again, I got this from the 00 files. At the beginning of this scene, they're walking into the park, and you hear a marching band in the background, and they're playing the song, The British Grenadiers March.
Uh-huh.
That is the same march that you hear in Diamonds Are Forever when they're in Blofeld's office and in the computer room on the oil rig. In Diamonds Are Forever, and they play the marching song. It's the exact same song that they play here. So there's a tie-in between here and something in Diamonds Are Forever. And again, I owe the 00 files credit for that one.
All right, cool. Yeah, the guys are fun. All right, so anyway, this black guy that we mentioned, that you said he was kind of taking his glasses off, there he is in the lecture hall. He's always watching Palmer, because he told him, I'm going to watch you. And if you're clean, you're fine. If you're not, I'll kill you. So this black guy's still watching as Palmer and Jacques Carswell are in the office.
Yeah, he's standing on the street looking up at a window.
Yeah. And Carswell shows Palmer a book. Induction of Psychoneuroses by Conditioned Reflex Under Stress. Palmer says, what does that mean? And Carswell says, it means I know why 17 scientists cease to function.
Now, this acronym that he pulls out here should have been IPCRESS. He could have still called it IPCRESS, not IPCRESS.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at that and he's underlining what these words are, it's like, this is not making any sense to me at all, that's how you would come up with that acronym.
Yeah, they get, induction of psychoneuroses by conditioned reflex under stress. That's how it goes. Anyway, that's IPCRESS. But how many acronyms do that kind of stuff? NASA does that all the time with the naming things and everything else.
There's one other thing in that. When he points it out, and he's holding the book up, and he highlights the thing, And then there's a cut, and he's talking about these 17 scientists.
Yeah.
And he flips through these holograph cards. Now, most people probably don't know what he was looking at there, but the holograph cards were the computer punch cards.
That's
so
what
when
they had.
When I learned the computer industry stuff, I learned on punch cards.
Yeah, that's what they had then.
And then they had them there, but it was a weird cut because then he's back to holding the book the exact same way. But as a guy who grew up with punch cards, I really appreciated seeing those again.
Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of neat because now we know what IPCRESS stands for, and kind of chills run up your spine a little bit. It's like, oh, this is something. And eventually, Carswell has to go somewhere. He wants to go check something out, and he's taking Palmer's car, and
that's never a good thing.
He's killed.
Yes.
And the IPCRESS book kind of disappears from Palmer's desk, and we're all wondering what the hell is going on here?
Because Palmer locks this thing up and leaves the room and then comes back in not much longer and books
after
gone.
He finds out that Carswell's been killed. Obviously, they killed Carswell thinking it was Palmer because it was Palmer's car.
Yeah.
And so there's again additional layers of the mystery here, which is intriguing, sucking you into the movie even more. So back at his apartment, we discover that the Black American agent is dead.
Well, he goes back to his apartment to get his stuff because since they thought it was him, Gene says, come stay at my place.
Yeah.
Because they're after you.
Yeah. It's another great camera shot, one I really appreciated here. Through the top of a light, like shooting from the ceiling down through the shade of the light, and you see the dead Black American agent lying on the floor in Palmer's flat. Well, so now you're thinking, was this a setup? Like the story would go, hey, Palmer killed another American agent since he killed the taped glasses guy already. And now they killed Palmer because they shot him in the car. And was it set up to look like that? So you can see that this is now got Palmer thinking, what is this? And what is actually going on here?
And so Palmer ends up telling Dalby about what happened, and that maybe Ross is the guy framing him because he had asked for the microfilm of the IPCRESS file. So he tells him that. Mm-hmm. And then he gets back to Gene Courtney's flat, and as he's leaving, they kiss, and he says, see ya. And she immediately picks up the phone and calls Ross.
Yeah, now we're suspicious of her.
Is that what she'd been doing solely at Ross's direction?
Yeah, right. They do a great job of that.
Yeah, so then Palmer goes to the train station because you have to have a train in a spy movie.
Yeah, and there was one already in the beginning, the very beginning.
That's true. So, it opens with the train. Yeah. So he goes to the train to get on this train. And it was really funny because I'm watching this the first time through. As he gets on this train, I'm thinking, okay, this is the second train scene. We haven't seen a fight on a train. Right? Radcliffe disappears, but there was not a fight in a train. Every spy movie that's got a train, there's a fight or at least a chase on a train. Yeah. And in this one, there really is no fight. I mean, some guy comes in with a gun and takes him off the train, but there's not a big fight.
No.
And Fury in his director's commentary talks about the fact that he didn't want to have any fights in this movie. In fact, there's only one fight, and it's really lame. But some guy at Universal, Ernie Nibb, told Fury, you've got to have a fight in this. So he filmed that really lame fight scene.
Yeah, that was a lame
outside
fight.
Albert Hall.
Yeah.
But they totally missed an opportunity of what could have been a short fight in the train, which would be keeping to the way most spy movies that have a train have a fight or at least a chase.
All right. So on the train, Palmer gets abducted, and Grantby is behind it. So he's imprisoned. And Grantby says they're in Albania. Yeah,
now this actually is something that Wesley Britton talks about in Beyond Bond, because he says they're in Albania, but they're not in Albania. They're in London.
No, they're not.
And he talks about how that was a common ruse in the Mission Impossible TV series as well.
Absolutely.
And in fact, even in Mission Impossible 1, it opens with that. Where the guy gives up the name Medvedev, whatever it was.
Yes, right.
Where the guy gives up that name, and then they turn and open, and they really were kind of almost in a set that they built to get this guy to give up the name.
Pull down the walls, and
So I
love that stuff.
Definitely an influence there.
Yeah. And so here he does say he's in Albania. So they're depriving him of food and sleep, and they're going to perform these treatments on him. It's a grim scene, tough torture. And Palmer is resisting being brainwashed. And you don't know if they got to him or not because they've been conditioning him. And he's trying to hold off the conditioning through pain, causing pain. He has a nail he found from his cell, and he's cutting his hand with it and stuff like that to try to distract his brain.
That's right, to keep the brainwashing from happening. Now, This is one of those things I said earlier. We have to be careful. We pay attention to the dates of things. So there's this whole brainwashing thing that happens, and that's what happened to Radcliffe as well. Yeah. He was brainwashed. Here, They're trying to brainwash Palmer. Now, the book, the IPCRESS File, came out in 1962. The next year is when Ian Fleming came out with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which has Blofeld brainwashing, that same repetitive, almost hypnosis talking, giving the guidance as to what they're supposed to do to his angels in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Boy, did Fleming get that idea from Deighton's book here? It sure has the same kind of feel to it.
Who knows? But there was a lot of that stuff going on in the real world, and it was becoming, some of that was leaking out. So Palmer eventually escapes, overpowering the two guards who were coming in to get him because they wanted to terrorize him and brainwash him. Every time he fell asleep, they were going to go get him and take out. So he's pretending he's sleeping. Two guards go in, bam, gets the better of him, and he escapes. He calls Dalby immediately, and he tells him that he got out. And then there's some interaction going on with Dalby and someone else in the room. We're not going to say who. Dalby tells Palmer to call Ross and to meet him at the warehouse. And Dalby says, I'll meet you there too, Palmer. So we don't know.
So we're going to end up with Palmer, Ross, and Dalby all at the warehouse.
Yes. And then Dalby says something to Palmer to make sure that he understands the message that, hey, you got to get to the warehouse. And we're not going to say exactly what he says here.
Yeah, so we don't want to give it away. If you haven't seen the movie, we've told you a lot, but there's a great ending to this that we don't want to blow for you.
Yeah. And the warehouse scene where they eventually do meet, and we don't know if other agents are going to be there too, because at one point Dalby says something about other agents going there as well. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen at the warehouse. But the warehouse scene is great. It's great spy stuff. From the setting, the lighting, the sound, the music. Dalby's there, Palmer's there, and Ross is there. And as each of the characters is standing under lights or is being lit by a certain method, it's eerie and intriguing and scary. And it's a great, great scene.
Yeah, for a last scene, they really did a great job with it. The suspense is there. Again, we're not going to give it away the ending here, but they really did a great job with this. And the cool thing to me is this was Michael Caine's first starring role. It's kind of like Bond.
He was in Zulu already, wasn't he?
He was in it, but he wasn't really the star.
Yeah, he wasn't a star. He wasn't a star of it.
So he's the leading man here, and just kind of like Connery in Bond. But I'll tell you, in this scene, he did a great job.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
He did a great job throughout the entire movie. And actually, Michael Caine is one of my favorite actors of all time. He's just good in everything he does. And he's that kind of guy and that kind of an actor. He's just terrific.
And if you're a fan of The Kingsman, even today, he's still acting.
Yeah. This is a great spot to wrap up our IPCRESS File decoding. As a spy movie fan, you must see this classic either for the first time or rewatch it because it is one of the best out there. And Michael Caine is superb, as he always is. It offers intrigue, espionage at its roots, and a complicated but great storyline.
Oh, I agree. I could deal with the less of the trickery on the camera shots, but that's my bias. And still, I recommend the movie highly.
There you go.
This has been Tom Pizzato.
And Dan Silvestri.
Please subscribe to our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies, right now. Have a movie in mind we should cover? Tell us about it on Twitter at @SpyNavigator. And if you're listening now, send us a message on Twitter and tell us where you're listening from. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Talk to you next time.